Hello, my name is Tiffany Sensel, and today I am teaching how to use your Cricut to create instructional materials for your classroom for the 2021 Sparcc Technology Conference. Like I said, my name is Tiffany Sensel, and I've been using the Cricut for over 15 years. Currently, I own the Personal Machine, the Air, from the Explorer family, the Maker, and the Joy. A little over 5 years ago, I started hosting craft retreats and teaching Cricut classes at those retreats. You can find information on those retreats by visiting my Facebook group. I also have a YouTube channel and an Etsy shop where I sell Cricut cutting files. Recently, I've been approved as a Cricut affiliate as well. There are links on the last slide in the handouts for this video for my Etsy shop, YouTube channel, and Facebook group. If you haven't already printed out the handouts, you will want to pause the video and print them out. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is, the first one is name and letter tracing, where you will cut out your students' names and they will be able to run their fingers through the ridges, if you can see. There. The next thing we're going to do is calendar wall using magnets. So these were all cut out with the Cricut. You do not need to have the Maker to cut any of these projects out. You can use the older machines as well to cut these out. The Learning Standards display is the next thing that we will work on. Motivational stickers, like these ones. And finally, a word wall. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to work on is the name and letter tracing. The materials you will need is the Cricut craft board, so that is what this looks like. And on the inside of the packaging, let me open this up. The Cricut has put all of the cut settings on the inside of the packaging. And this is how thick. So this craft board is only 0.2 millimeters thick. Any of the Cricut machines can cut it out. Okay, so let's switch over to Cricut Design Space. So if you look over here on the right hand side of the screen, you can see that I have the text and then I have the text offset. So how I created this was I first started by clicking on text and typing her name. And a lot of times the Cricut will take a few minutes before it will display what you have just typed, depending on the size of your project and the speed of your internet. Our internet is pretty slow, so a lot of times I have to wait a little while. So you can see it started up here. The font that is selected right now is Cricut Sans. If you wanted to change that, you would just click on this drop down arrow. And there are options across the top. You can see all of your fonts. System fonts will show you only the fonts that are on your system, like what device you're using. Cricut will show you only Cricut fonts. Only kerned, so I want to go back to all. Only kerned fonts. Kerning means they have already gone through and done the spacing for you. For those of you that have been using a Cricut for a while, they did not used to do the spacing for you. You would have to ungroup the letters and move them around a lot. They have made it more like what your fonts look like in Microsoft Word, where they're already spaced appropriately. If you want to see all of your fonts though, you should unselect that because it won't show you everything. Filters. Normally I click on my fonts. That will help filter out anything that you don't own so that you don't have to purchase anything. And then you can change the font to whatever you would like. I'm going to leave mine as Cricut Sans. So I'm just going to click out of here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. All right, to create the offset, this is a new tool in Cricut. It's up here in the top. We click on the drop-down menu for it, and it will bring us up all the options that are available. The distance is how far away your bubble is going to be from all of the letters. Right now, the default is 0.25. If I wanted to make that bigger, I can either select the numbers and manually type larger or smaller, or I can drag this and make it bigger or smaller. If you go smaller, it's going to make an inset. And you can see if you're too small, it'll just do a bubble around each individual letter. And if you want it to be one great big bubble, you need to make sure it's big enough that everything is touching. Okay, so that looks good to me right there. The corners, if you change this, it will, if you look right here, it'll make this more squared off. If you would prefer that, you could select that. The rounded corners is what I did the first time. If you unselect Weld Offset, if you watch here between the J and the I, it will put the line in between where it keeps them. If I unselect it, it will keep them all as separate letters. That's probably not what you want. You probably want one big bubbled letter, so leave that selected. And then click Apply. And then it'll auto-generate that offset. So you can change the color of that. I'm going to go ahead and change it to brown because that's the color of the material that I want to cut this out with. I'm going to change the black letters here to white because I want them to actually be cut out. We're going to delete those later. Now, if I send this to the Cricut as it is, I'm going to hide my original one. If I send this to the machine to make it, right now I have, if you look over here, I have a white layer and I have a brown layer. If I send it to make it, it is going to come up as two separate colors that need to be made. That's not what I wanted. So let's hit cancel. What I want is for it to cut the letters out of the brown layer. So I'm going to select both, and I have two options. I could slice it, and that will permanently slice all the way through, and I'll show you what that would do. It will create kind of like a cookie cutter where the white layer cut down through the brown layer. So you'll still have this white top layer, and then you can see where it cut down through. So that creates the cutout part. That's the part I want to keep. And then we also have the part that was cut. So we no longer want that part, so I'm going to delete it. So really this part up here is all I need. I wouldn't even need this part at this point. So then I could send this. The only trouble with that is if you look over here on the side, my sliced result no longer has where I could click on it and change the font. So I'm going to go back and undo that. The other option, instead of slicing, go back to right before I sliced. So now you can see where it's no longer sliced. I'm going to select it, make sure I'm still centered. The other option would be to attach the two layers to each other. So when I click attach, what that does is when it sends it to the Cricut to cut, they will both be cut attached to each other. So when I click make it, now they're both images there are attached to each other. When I made this one, I moved it more to the center like this so that it could have some space around the outside edges. So when I'm on the mat at this point, you can move it around. Click continue. And the base material here, click browse all materials. And this material is called craft board, spelled with a K, R-A-F-T-B-O-A-R-D. And it's the second one here, craft board. And that can be done with any of the machines. So currently I have my Maker connected. It could also be cut out with the Air or with the Joy. This craft board is only 0.2 millimeters thick. So for the craft board, you want to make sure that it's really stuck down good. And sometimes you'll even want to get a tool to really make sure that this is down, because you don't want the craft board to move in the middle of the cut. And we'll click load and cut. Okay, now before I would click unload, so normally you would go ahead and click unload, but before I do that, I'm going to lift this up and just make sure that everything seems to have cut out easy, that I'm not going to have to go through and use like a knife blade or anything to recut stuff. Looks like everything cut out pretty good except for this one little spot right here, and I can fix that with the knife blade. So we can load. Pull this off. And there you go. And for this purpose, we would want to keep the center part of this. And then what I did was I glued it down to some cardstock. And then your students are able to run their fingers through the letters. Okay, next up is the calendar wall with magnets. The materials you'll want is magnetic sheet paper, and just regular paper. So the magnetic sheet paper, I bought like a 50 pack of this. This is just adhesive backed. You can see there. So you can stick it to anything really. And to create these, I just printed out the words and the numbers, stuck them on the magnetic paper, and then cut them out. So for this one, what we did was we inserted the text, August, created the offset just like before. So that was up here. You select all your options. Now something to know, you can create as many offsets as you want. So sometimes you might want to have multiple bubbled layers. I'm going to unflatten this one so that I can show you what I mean. So if I were to create an offset, hit apply. So maybe I want one that really makes this stand out. So I could do that, and then I could create an offset of that offset. And I'm going to go even just a little bit. Oh, no, let's go with that. And then I can create an offset of that if I want an even bigger bubble to hold the whole thing together. So this is actually 1, 2, 3, and 4 layers thick now. And you could glue those, cut them individually out, and then glue them up. Or what I did for this project was I didn't want to have multiple layers to it. What I did was I selected both the bubbled background and the word August, make sure they're still centered, and then I used the Flatten tool. If you look down here in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's the word Flatten. When you click on Flatten, it will flatten all layers down to the base layer. So when I click Flatten here, the Cricut is going to send this to the printer to be printed out on regular paper or cardstock, whatever you choose. And then you're going to put that into the Cricut to be cut. And it will cut out the bottommost layer. So it's not going to cut out all these individual letters, it's going to cut out the bubble around the outside background. Click Make It. And this is what it'll look like when it gets sent to the printer. So hit Continue. And on this screen, we'll click Send to Printer. It takes it a minute sometimes to connect with your printer. Up here is where it will display the printer, the number of copies that you're going to do. Add bleed is how you can tell where it's going to cut. What that does is it adds bleed just for a little bit of all of the outside edges that it's going to cut. It smears them out so that it makes sure where the Cricut cuts is colored, basically. So if I were to unselect Add Bleed, if you look really closely, these edges are going to get a little bit thicker when I click back on Add Bleed, so that it'll show where it's going to cut out. So I got my printer selected, click Print. Now this is going to connect to my printer and actually print it out on a piece of paper. Okay, so I can hear the printers going. While that's printing, I'm going to select my material. For this material, I am actually going to go ahead and add the magnetic paper behind it so that it cuts the magnet too. So the thickest material is going to be magnet. And we got magnetic sheet, printable magnetic sheet. You can select whichever one. Mine is 0.5 millimeters thick. And this can be cut with any one of the machines. All right, switching over to the document camera. So this printed. This is what it looks like. So when I send this to the maker, it is going to scan it for these lines, and that's what's going to tell it where to cut. Before I do that though, I want to take my magnetic sheet and attach it to the back of my words. So you take this off here, and then you would line it up and attach it on the back of the paper. Okay, we've got the magnetic sheet ready to go. Just so you can see, magnetic sheet is under there. Just push down, load. Cut. Right now it's scanning for these outside edges. Once it's found all the edges, it will come over here and detect the tool. Okay. Now that it knows the right tool's there, it's going to go ahead and start cutting. It's cutting around the 6. Went around twice. And now it's cutting out the circle inside the G and then around the outside edges. And it's going to go around the word August again for the second cut. Okay, now typically you would go ahead and click unload, but I'm going to double check to make sure that this cut the magnetic paper before I go. So it did cut. If I thought that it didn't, I could go ahead and hit the C again, and it would cut that all over one more time. But this looks like it cut pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and unload. And go ahead and pop this out. So there's the 6. Now the more detailed of a cut that you do, like this is a pretty good size bubble word, if your details were a little bit finer, you might want to, like I said, hit the C again and let it cut another time. Here we go. And that can be put back here on the magnetic board. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is the Learning Standards display. And this is cut out of vinyl. I typically like to use removable vinyl. You also will probably want transfer tape unless your letters are really big, and then you may not need that. But if you want everything to stay lined up just how it's cut out on the Cricut, you should get some transfer tape as well. Your cut settings are vinyl, and it's just a basic setting. So the vinyl, I like to use Oracle. It comes in 651 is the permanent vinyl, and 631 is the removable. But that's what vinyl looks like. It comes in rolls. And transfer tape is just a clear piece of tape that you put over top of it to move it. Okay, so to do this in Cricut Design Space, switch over here. It's pretty simple. Just insert your text, whatever you want it to be. For these magnets, I printed out the different subjects that I taught. I just printed them out like this. This is all one layer. I didn't do multiple layers. I just flattened it and printed it, and then I just put one strip of the magnetic sheet on the back for this. And then those just stick right to the whiteboard. So you insert your text, and when you click Make It, you'll want to select vinyl. There we go. So this is doing the print then cut for those subjects, and then down here is where it is going to cut out the vinyl. If you don't want it to do one of the parts of your project, you can just click on the mat that you want it to do on the left hand side, and whichever one is highlighted, like how this one is a lighter gray, that's the mat that it's going to cut currently. So occasionally you'll run into where you thought it was going to cut mat 1 and then it actually cuts mat 2. So we click continue. And when you see the set base material, when this stops spinning, it pops up. These are my favorite materials that I use all the time. To set your favorite materials, when you're in here, you just click over here on the right hand side. There's a star, and you can star different materials that you use all the time, so you don't have to constantly search for them. So you can see there is a ton of vinyl options. And you can see my favorite is just plain old vinyl. That seems to cut out well with my machine. So vinyl, and then you click cut, and it's going to go through and it will cut everything out. So once it's cut out, this is what it looks like. I've already started to weed out the part of the material that we don't want. So I was going to show you what that looks like for the rest of this. I use tweezers, just everyday tweezers. And when you peel it, you want to go slow because this is sticky, and if it gets stuck to the letters that you want to keep, you'll have a mess and probably have to start all over again. So peel at a sharp angle, and typically you'll want to have pretty good lighting on it. If it's not bright enough, you won't be able to see what you're weeding, but just go slow and pull through. If it starts to get stuck, you can use the tweezers to help it along. And then I typically keep this right next to me with the sticky side out to pull all these little pieces, and I just stick them to it. Okay, so now that you have this, this is what you have. And I just used a knife blade, in case you were wondering like how I didn't got this line here. I just used like a knife blade, and I just went through and I lightly cut this so that it wasn't wasting all of the whole sheet of paper doing this one project. But now that you have it like this, to get it actually on the whiteboard, you could peel each one of these letters individually up and then place them on the board, but then you're going to have to line everything back up again. So the transfer tape comes in handy. I just cut a small piece of the transfer tape off, about the same size that I needed. And what you do is you just lay that on here, and that's going to hold everything in place. And you want to push that down pretty good. I use one of the Cricut tools, or you could use a credit card. Just anything with a flat surface. And a lot of times I'll flip it over and rub through the back of it. And if you try to peel it up, it may or may not stick very well. Like, see how the E didn't stick? And I'm going to get part of it sticking. You want all of it to come up with the clear transfer tape. So transfer tape, you want it to be sticky enough that all the letters stick to it, but then when we go to put it on the whiteboard, the transfer tape will peel back off. So let's do that again. But this time, I'm going to peel from the back, and I'm actually going to peel away. Let me get it at an angle you can see. I'm going to peel away like this. And anything that doesn't, that starts to come up, just press it back down. So I wasn't at steep enough angle. You want to keep it down. Okay. Okay. So then you take that to your whiteboard. Okay, so here I have a little dry erase board. So you stick this on here. Again, press it down with a credit card, and then you can peel up the transfer tape just like that. Here we go. So the materials we used was the removable vinyl, the transfer tape. Remember to go slow and peel at a sharp angle. Use your transfer tape to apply detailed cuts. So the next thing, motivational stickers is what we're going to work on. And for these, you're going to need sticker paper or printable vinyl. Your cut settings are printable sticker paper, basic setting. Cricut makes printable vinyl is what I used. They also make sticker paper. Both of them you can print on, and they are just, you can see right here, you can peel it, and it's sticker paper. So it's a whole sheet of sticker paper. That's what the back looks like. You just put that through your printer, print whatever you want on it, and then the Cricut will cut out whatever you had on the background image. So let me show you how to do that in Cricut Design Space. To make these, what I did was I started out with the background shape, which is a circle. So we'll insert a circle. And I think Cricut will bring it in at, 3.111 inches. That's too big. You can either drag in the bottom corner to make it smaller, or you can click on it, and up here in the top we can change this sizing, change it to a 1. I think it's angry because I have too many Cricut Design Space tabs open, so I'm going to quit that one just to make sure. By the way, if you didn't know, you can have multiple projects open at the same time. To do that, you just right click on your Cricut icon and open a new Design Space tool. So on here, let's switch this to 1 inch like I wanted. There we go. And I wanted that to be orange for this project as the background color. Now to get this center circle, I'm going to add another shape. I could go over here and click shapes and do another one, or I'm going to duplicate it so it makes a second one. I'm going to make it colored white, and I want it to be just a little bit smaller. So I can drag it down, or I know I want it to be 0.8. To get those lined up, select both circles, click a line up here on the top, and center. And then that will move them so that they're both perfectly lined up to center to each other. Okay. To insert where it says Sparcc Tigers curved, first I'll do the Sparcc. Give it a second to load the whole word in. That is obviously way too big. So you can either drag and make it smaller, or you can click up at the top whenever the size becomes available. Okay, so I hid some of the other stickers so that we just had the project that we're looking at. Let's go ahead and make this Sparcc word 0.1 tall so that it's the same height here. And how we're going to make it curved is we're going to click on curve right here. This is kind of a new feature in Cricut Design Space. When you click on it, it's going to give you a slider bar. You can drag and drop the slider bar, or you can actually change the number of the curvature. I typically drag it because I'm not sure what the number is that I want. So I just kind of drag it and see. Go slow and pause a couple of times. That looks almost good, right? Let's see. And then I can still keep changing it even after I've set it in place. I'm going to go back and move it just a little. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. And then we'll do it again for tigers. But this time we want it to curve the other way. So get this small enough here. Right about there. And if you wanted your letters to be spaced farther apart, right here, this letter spacing, you can just click on it. And if you watch the word tigers, it's spreading the letters farther and farther apart. So you can do that however much you want. And then we're going to curve that. And this time, instead of curving it to go this way, we're going to curve it the other way. So I'll drag the slider the other way. I'm going to select all of it, and I'm going to align it center so that I make sure everything's in the middle. There we go. All right, and then if you notice the center circle, I have it just white here. If I set that to, we're going to print this all out as a sticker. If I set it to print then cut, in my options here, instead of just a plain color, I can click on pattern. And that'll bring up a whole bunch of different patterns that I can put as the background. In those patterns, you can edit all of them, how far apart the lines are spaced and how thick the pattern is. So I'll just click one of these. And then it'll take it a second to think about it. It's loading up this pattern into here. Okay, there, the pattern loaded. And if you wanted to edit that pattern, you just click on edit, and this allows you to change the scale of it. This is the tilt of the different lines, which way they go. And you can also rotate everything. I like it how it is, so I'm just going to leave it alone. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is insert the text in the middle. Put a good job. I'm going to align it center. And if I don't like the amount of spacing here, that's letter spacing or line spacing. I don't like the line spacing. I think it's too far apart. So I'm just going to click on this until I think it looks good. There we go. Make sure it's centered. And to me, that doesn't actually look centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Ungroup. Zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing better. And what I did when I clicked Ungroup is now I have all the letters are separated from each other. So I'm going to click on the whole word job, and I'm going to move it over to where it looks good to the eye. And actually, I'm going to make it even a little bit bigger. So now there, it's all set. I'm going to weld it together. Now once I weld it, if you look over here, it'll say the text, the font that I used was DTC Cozy. When I click weld, I'm no longer able to edit the text. You can see it's a welded result. If I double click on it, it's no longer text, it's just an object. I believe though, I can right click here and click on image info, and it'll tell me the font was DTC Cozy. So if you can't remember what font it was you used, you right click on it and it'll tell you. But you can't edit it once it's been welded. Okay, so now that I have this all ready here, I'm going to get the good job on top of it so it fits. And we can change the color of it if we want it to stand out a little better. And for this sticker, I created an offset from the letter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on this one as well. It is probably going to make a great big bubble because 0.25 inches is way bigger than what our good job is. So we will probably want to bring that down. Okay, yeah, like I thought that was going to be way too big of a bubble around it. So let's bring that down to 0.02. Click enter. That's more what I thought it was going to be. So let's click apply. Okay. And let's make an offset of the offset. And it'll keep our 0.02 setting. So I'll click apply. Alright, and I'm going to change the color of that one so that we can see it a little better. Make it light gray. Okay, so we have this layer of good job, and then we have this black one. And then another thing I'm going to show you is the contour tool. The contour tool is good for, if I zoom in here, you can see, do you see all those little holes that it's going to cut out in the middle here? If you do not want those little holes, select the object and then click on contour, and you can hide the contours, the cuts that you don't want it to cut. So it'll typically take it a little while to bring up the actual picture of this image. On the right hand side it shows you all the cuts that are a part of it. It's got the big bubble, that's the outline, and then this is all those little pieces on the inside of it that it's going to cut out. If we don't want those, we just highlight them and it's got them hidden now. And we'll click X to go out of there, and you can see it's filled them all in. So that's one solid shape now. So that was the contour tool. And that gray doesn't show up very good there in the background. So actually I'm going to change it. Let's change it to white. There we go. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good for this sticker. So if I were to send it to Make It right now, it would want to cut all of these things out separately on separate mats. So if you see over here on the right hand side, I don't have anything put together. Like the word tigers is its own thing. So to get those all together, I would select all and I will click flatten. And you'll notice that the outside edges look like they don't look as hard of a line, and it's all been flattened together. So this is all one shape. Over here on the right hand side you can see it cleaned it up a lot. So I've got that, I've got this sticker, and then I've got this other sticker still here. Let's find it. There it is. Where what I did was I typed up show your work, and then I created an offset of show your work please, and then an offset of that. So let's do that one real quick. And because I wanted it to all be separately sized, like how the word work is bigger. I typed each line different so that I could space them myself. If you unclick this locked part right here, there you go, that'll allow you to change the proportions. And then line it all up, click align, center left to right. If I were, by the way, to have clicked center like this, it puts it all in the middle. So that's not what I wanted to do. All right, now I am going to click attach so that show your work please stays all together like this. That doesn't do any changes to the cut, it just attaches them to be spaced next to each other. And then create an offset. 0.02 will probably be good. And we'll click apply. And then we'll change that color to the orange. And then we'll create another offset. And that one isn't quite big enough, but I'll go ahead and click apply there. You can see how it still has a lot of gaps in the middle. For that one, let's look at that black layer. Put these off to the side here. So this black layer has a lot of holes in the middle of it. I could have made that offset bigger, or I can click on contour and I can get rid of all those little pieces inside of contour. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the big bubble out background layer, and I'm going to get rid of all those little cuts in the middle. And so that makes it one big piece. So that's better. There we go. Line it all back up, align center. And then again, if I were to send it like this, it's going to cut out. You see over here it says basic cut, basic cut, basic cut. It's going to cut them all out separately. And that's not what I want. Get that back lined up. Not sure what happened there. Let's detach and redo that. So what I did over here to click on all three of these at the same time, if you hold the shift button down, you can click on all three of them. Align center. There we go. Select all and we'll click flatten, and that'll make it now a print then cut. So we'll send that, click make it, and send that to the printer. So right now it's scanning these black cut lines. Occasionally, if it doesn't detect them very well, it helps to shine a light to give it a little extra light there to find them. So this means that it's detected the lines. It's making sure that it has the right tool in. And now it's going to cut out the circles. Right there it's cutting around. Show your work, please. Okay, and that means it is done. You click on unload. And there are the stickers. And when you peel, sometimes, depending on how sharp your blade is, you might have to help it a little. And then it peels right back up. So then you roll this part away, and there's your stickers. Okay, so click cancel cut. So that was the motivational stickers. Next up is the word wall. So a lot of teachers have these in their classrooms, and you can use your Cricut to print them out or to cut out the different letters that you want. For mine, I just used regular paper, cardstock, and the cut settings would just be cardstock basic setting. So you insert your background shape that will be cut. And let's go over to that Cricut project. Let's close this one. So this is what I have got pre-designed here for us. How this was created was I clicked a background shape here. And if you're wondering how I got the cornered edges, what I did was, for the shapes, they have a square. So I inserted this square like that, and then when you do the offset of a square, you can have it do the rounded edges, and that's all I did to get rounded edges on it. And then I deleted the hard. And then you can click on ungroup there and change the size of it. And so that's how I got those rounded edges. This is just inserting text and inserting another shape. And you could print this out as it is, like you could select all and you could flatten if you wanted it to print all on one sheet of paper. How I wanted mine was to be multi-dimensional, so I did a mixture of ways. What I did for my word wall was I printed the words onto the white shape and had that be one layer, and then I cut out the background layer as a separate layer. So I'll switch you over so you can see that. So for mine, I have the pink is a background layer, and then the yellow is another layer. If you wanted to put all of those together on one big shape, you would have to make sure that your Cricut, the Air and the Maker, can both cut up to 23.5 inches long by 11.5 inches wide. So you would have to make sure, like how this would be 12 inches, I would need to make the whole thing a little bit smaller if I wanted to try to get it all on one mat for cutting. Okay, I'm ready to print and cut for the word wall. I've already gone ahead and printed. I have to tell it that it is cardstock. And now it's ready. And again, it's going to scan the black lines. Okay, click unload. And there are all of our pieces. Now for paper, sometimes when you peel it up, you'll bend the paper, and if it's bending, like see how that warped that a little bit and that bothers you, sometimes people will bend the board back away from the paper to unload. Alright, our next cut is to do the backgrounds. Now I actually want these backgrounds to be pink, not black, like I had on my examples. So when I load my paper, I'll show you, I'm just going to load pink paper, even though on the screen the computer thinks we're loading black paper. It doesn't matter. Just making sure this is all pressed down good. We will load. Make sure that on the screen the sheet we want is selected, and push cut. This time it went straight to cutting because there was no print then cut scan marks for it to look for. Okay, double check and make sure it looks good. Hit unload. And then we would take the pieces that we cut, and you could match them up on here where they went, and you could glue them down with whatever adhesive you like. And then to make them as a word wall display, you would take that, and then like I have this board, you could put this on here, like that. And in the classroom, what we did was we used these, each student created their own to display in the classroom. Okay, so that's the word wall. I've included on here a couple of other useful design space tools. I've already created these tutorials. If you want to know how to download Etsy purchases and upload them into Design Space, right here's a tutorial I've created on that with the instructions. How to download fonts to use in Cricut Design Space here. And I've also included the difference what weld and slice do. A lot of times those are two features that people ask a lot about. And if you were to come to any of my retreats where we do Cricut tutorials, switch back over here. During those tutorials, I give you these sheets, and it's just like cards that show you the differences between slice, grouping, attaching, contour. So there's a ton of these, and we go over them, and you can ask all the questions you want, and then they're cut out so that they fit nicely right there into that slot on your machine. Okay, so if you're interested in any of that type of stuff, I have an Etsy shop This is if you printed out the instructions to go with this, you can scan that from your phone and this will take you to my Etsy shop. This QR code will take you to my other YouTube tutorials. And down here, this QR code will take you to my Facebook for Tiffany's Craft Room, where you can get retreat information. And I just have recently become a Cricut affiliate. So if you purchase any of the Cricut materials and you use this link to go to Cricut's website, I will get a small percentage from that purchase. Thanks for watching, and I hope to hear from you. You can check out Tiffany's Craft Room on Facebook, and if you would like any personalized Cricut SVG files, I'd love to create them for you. Thanks, and I hope you have a great school year.